Heavenly Father, thank you for all our many blessings and the freedom and liberty we so richly enjoy. Thank you for the right to gather this evening and as a community and to have our voices heard. Please give us your strength, guidance, and wisdoms in our deliberations this evening. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We have a quorum. Announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to provide you with an update to a couple of items that were at the Board of Supervisors last week. The first was the Milestone Telecommunications Tower, and the Board of Supervisors held the public hearing and closed it, but they continued the vote until December. The second item was the code amendment for the solar energy facilities, which the Board of Supervisors did pass with a 7-0 vote.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Next item up on the agenda is the review and approval of minutes of October 18th, 2017. If there are no questions or comments or revisions, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
I'll call a vote, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next item up on the agenda is review and approval of Plat P17-0003. Ms. Lee, would you like to make a motion, or would...
Whose district is this in?
Go ahead, Kimberly.
I'm sorry.
I have
Kimberly.
a presentation if you would like, but otherwise,
I'd like to see it.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a preliminary plat amendment to the Village at Courthouse Commons. The original preliminary plat was approved back in 2015. It was for 60 single-family attached lots and 97 single-family detached lots for a total of 157. Since that time, the owner-developer has changed their development plan. I think market is driving it a bit. Some are preferring these smaller lots to the larger lots. So they've changed their development plan, and instead they'll be creating 74 single-family attached lots and 100 single-family detached lots for a total of 174. So there's a net increase of 17 lots. This plat was reviewed by the TRC, and it does meet all code requirements, and staff does recommend that the Planning Commission approve Piece 17-0003 with the adoption of the attached resolution.
Please, the chair, I'd like to ask a question. Why, what's the background on why this has been changed? I mean, doesn't this make this a whole new development, so to speak? Shouldn't this be presented as a whole new development?
Well, it is an amendment to the approved preliminary plat because they are increasing the number of lots by 17.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. We have to pass these plats.
Yes, sir, and that's what's
I
before you
understand,
tonight.
but they've added more houses to this development. We heard this issue before with the number of houses that we approved. Now they're going to come back with a plat amendment and add more houses?
Yes, sir.
What's right about that?
This is in conformance with their rezoning and their GDP and the maximum number of lots that they are permitted to have. So,
But we approved a certain number of lots originally. To change that, would that be, to me, would be a representation of the whole development?
Mr. Chairman, this is just a section of the overall development, so the total number of lots approved with the rezoning remains the same. They're just increasing the number of lots that are being part of this section of the development. There will be other sections of this development as it moves forward through the years, but the overall approval with the rezoning still remains in place.
Kimberly, is the, I visited, I've been over there and looked at it. Now, are the lots that they've done, are those the additional, that they're changing additional townhouse lots?
It's
Or
a
are they
little bit
just
of a
single family, or
combination.
it's a little bit of combination?
It's a little bit of a combination. This row up here and a few scattered within this section were what they called the estate lots. They were a little bit larger, and they had direct access from this main road here.
Right.
Those just weren't selling as quickly, I
Right.
believe, as these smaller, what they called traditional lots. So they kind of combined some of these larger estate lots that were located internally here. They combined some of those to create a few more of those traditional lots, and they were able to create a few more attached lots as well. So it's kind of a combination.
Understood, okay.
I have a question. Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
yes.
And Kimberly, when we do rezonings, are we specifically approving the specific lots or the zoning? So, hey, it's going to R4. So if the density is complying with R4, what are we approving when we do rezonings? Again, is it the zoning or the actual number of lots that they are permitted to build?
Well, each case could be different, but with this particular one, they were zoned to MU3, and then there were maximum number of units approved with the proffers or conditioned with the proffers.
Excuse me, but they did present the number of lots. We'd heard this issue, and we were told a certain number of lots. We passed this thing with that knowledge.
Yes, sir, and that was for the overall development. This was part of a much, much larger courthouse village.
So what you're telling me,
project.
this one section is going to enlarge, and one of the other sections is going to decrease?
Right, they're still held to that maximum
Yeah,
lot
but-
count. Yes, sir,
So they have to decrease in some other area?
that's right, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
the
Mr.
other
Burns.
issue is on the mixed use, part of having the mixed use stuff, and having more flexibility to do it. Because what some of the developers were complaining about was it is market driven. So where they have a situation, so they're not exceeding the overall number of lots, but then if the market, and they've done a particular section, and it's advantageous for them to change it up a little bit, as long as they're not under the overall threshold, they're good. And it's more almost administratively, we need to do it anyway, so.
Right,
Because
yes,
they've
sir.
conformed with everything, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, I move to approve P 17-003 Village at Courthouse Commons preliminary plat amendment with conditions.
We have a second. All right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? No. One no vote. Motion passes. Moving up to the next item, public hearing, SUP 17-0004.
All right, thank you. This is a request for a special use permit approval to construct and operate an electrical substation on approximately 4.6 acres of mixed-use 3 zoned property. The SUP area is part of a larger tract of land that's owned by Walton, Virginia LLC, and it was part of a fairly recently approved rezoning project known as Alexander's Crossing. The applicant in this case is Rappahannock Electric Co-op, or REC. They are the contract purchaser for approximately 2.7 acres to construct this facility. The proposed electrical substation is defined by the Virginia State Code as a public utility. Therefore, the county does need to determine whether it's in conformance with our comprehensive plan. So given that the substation will provide a necessary electric service and it's appropriately located to the existing transmission lines, staff does recommend that the Planning Commission find that the project is in substantial accord with the comprehensive plan, and staff also is recommending approval of the SUP with conditions. Here's an aerial of the photo. This project is located on the west side of Massaponax Church Road, approximately 1,500 feet south of Hickory Hill Drive. The entire 33-acre tract of land is what's outlined in red and what was one of the parcels part of that Alexander's Crossing rezoning. On the GDP for Alexander's Crossing, this area was shown as open space. However, there was nothing approved as part of that rezoning that would prohibit this portion of the property to be developed as a substation. And those minimum open space the minimum open space area will have to be met as Alexander's Crossing develops. The SUP area is only for 4.6 acres, which is located at the front, highlighted there with the star. You can see from the aerial that there is currently quite a bit of vacant land surrounding this property, and there are residential properties that line Massaponax Church Road, with the closest residence being right here, which is about 330 feet away. Here's another aerial. I've taken the parcel lines layer off and zoomed in. You can see here that there's an existing gravel drive. This is how the substation will be accessed, and of course here are the existing transmission lines. The applicant did conduct a community meeting over the summer, and concerns that were raised were primarily related to the visual impact the substation would have on Massaponax Church Road, also safety and environmental questions, noise questions. The applicant, and you'll see on the GDP here shortly, that they've tried to address the visual impact with some screening. The noise, they acknowledged that it is going to be a low hum, and that DEQ highly regulates these facilities with respect to environmental impacts. Here is the layout sheet from the GDP. Outlined in orange is the total area of the SUP, which is the 4.6 acres. The area shaded in blue is the 2.7 acres that REC intends to purchase. So this extra acreage is going to be within an easement to allow our REC access, and this is really going to be their maintenance and access area. As I mentioned, that existing gravel drive off Massaponax Church Road is how the substation will be accessed. They are going to be widening this drive to 18 feet, and they'll be paving here at the entrance to meet VDOT standards. In conformance with the proffers approved with Alexander's Crossing, this is going to be the 60 feet of right-of-way will be dedicated, and they've shown that here on the GDP as well. The traffic impact for this use is really going to be minimal. Once it's constructed, REC maintenance and inspection staff will be visiting the site about once a month. The site development immediately along the frontage will include their stormwater management area, including a detention pond right here. The entire compound will be fenced with an 8-foot barbed wire chain link fence. The eastern and southern end, where you see this dashed line, will have the vinyl slats to make that, to provide more of a screen to the electrical, the utility equipment inside. Also shown here in the light shaded green areas is their evergreen screening. This is the applicant's attempt at trying to mitigate that visual impact from Massaponax Church Road. Staff shared the same concerns the public did. All of this shaded area right here will be evergreen tree species that will be 6 feet at planting, and evergreen shrubs that would be 4 feet at planting. This shaded green area is going to be a 30-foot in width existing vegetation tree save area. And they'll be supplementing that with evergreen infill as needed, and those details would be hammered out during the site plan stage. Within the fenced area will be the electric equipment, utility sheds, and shown here with the yellow dot is a 75-foot communications pole. This is solely for REC's use for their internal communication. Findings in favor: the use is substantially in accord with the goals and policies of the mixed-use designation, and it is appropriately located there adjacent to the existing transmission lines. With the tree save area, with the proposed landscaping and the fencing with the vinyl slats, the visual impact is going to be limited to the extent possible on this site, being right there on Massaponax Church Road. The substation does provide a necessary electric utility services to the county. Findings against: the proposed substation will have a visual impact from Massaponax Church Road, albeit it's going to be limited given the improvements that they're proposing. And also, the installation of a substation on Massaponax Church Road will alter the character. We saw that, particularly on the east side of Massaponax Church Road, it is very residential in character, and so this will change that character a bit. Staff's recommended conditions are that the site would be developed in substantial conformance with the GDP that was submitted. That would include the improvements to the access, all of the screening, all of fencing detail. And also that the existing tree save area shall be supplemented with evergreen plantings that would be a minimum of 6 feet at planting, and the number would be determined at the site plan stage. So again, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission find the project in accord with the comprehensive plan and does recommend approval of the SUP with these recommended conditions.
Kim, can you go back to the satellite overhead photo? Go to the previous one. You show with your mouse over that the tree save area along the right-of-way.
It will be right here.
Okay, so it's fairly heavily wooded in that area. Okay.
It is, and they'll provide us a tree survey during the site plan review, and they're going to supplement that as needed to beef it up.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Carter.
Kim, you said, I didn't get it, I'm sorry, something about a visit once a month?
Yes, ma'am. The
Who
only
does a visit once a month?
Rappahannock Electric Co-op will have their maintenance and inspection staff visit the site about once a month just to check everything, make sure everything is in order.
And when they check, I sure hope they check and make sure those evergreens are living.
Well, and that would be a code enforcement issue as well.
Please, because it can become an ugly sight. And I know that they wouldn't want that to happen, so that's good. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Thompson.
Would you show that aerial photo again? That one right there, you got the star there, it's where the facility's gonna be located where the star is. And you pointed out that it's gonna change the existing character of the neighborhood. And that will come about because it's gonna be visible.
To an extent, yes, sir.
Well, the substation here is because of transmission lines. Is this true?
I believe that's part of the reason.
Could they
that
not
REC
move that a
selected
little
this.
closer to the transmission lines and a little further up? So they'd be completely in the woods?
I'd let REC, the applicant, answer that question on
And-
exactly why they chose this location.
I mean, I could just see extending the dirt road 100 yards or something. Thank you.
Any other questions? Hear from the applicant?
Mr. Chairman and other members of the Planning Commission, my name is Charlie Payne with the law firm Hurst and Fleischer. We represent the applicant. The applicant's representatives are here this evening, as well as our engineer from SDI. So whatever questions I can't answer, I'm sure they can. I appreciate staff's presentation. I think they've covered many of the key bases on this. We do have a PowerPoint that we'll go through pretty quickly, just to reiterate some of the key points and to just address some of the issues and questions that came up. As staff had noted, this property includes a portion of the Alexander's Crossing approval. That was a MU3 rezoning that happened a couple of years ago. We're going to utilize a portion of that 33.5 acres, which again is one of the several parcels. I think that total acreage in that development is over 300 acres. We're using about 4.675 acres of that 36A46. The location was chosen for several reasons. One, its proximity away from the overall development at Alexander's Crossing. Also, the need for not only to address future growth in that particular area, but current growth in that particular area with the hospital expansion, the Germana expansion, and also with the industrial development in that area and doctor's offices, et cetera. So this substation is necessary for not only future growth, but also for current growth. As stated, the project is within Alexander's Crossing approval. It was zoned M3. Special use permit is required under the MU zoning district for this use. Again, as I stated, this proposed use is necessary. Access will be off Massaponax Church Road. There's a current gravel road, as staff had shown. We're going to expand that to about 20 feet in width. It's going to be gravel. And as staff had noted, basically, there's going to, after construction, to be about one visit a month for general maintenance, et cetera. There is ongoing security in that location. You know, we've got security cameras, et cetera, so it's not going to be per se just left alone by itself. So we'll be on constant monitoring of the site. And we anticipate completing this in about 2 years if we're approved. Just the surrounding area, you were given a very good overview. Just remember that most of the property that surrounds this area, basically on 3 sides, is Walton's property, it's Alexander's Crossing property, which is zoned in mixed use. The other property to our immediate east is zoned RU, but the future land use for that property and the properties in that general area is mixed use. So even though they're today residential, they are for future planning to be mixed uses as well. And as staff had noted, we believe that this will have minimal impact on surrounding properties, and we have provided extensive buffering. We worked very hard with staff to ensure that, and we worked when we had our community meeting. That was the first issue that came up, and we were happy to address that with the fencing that we have proposed and also with the additional tree lines. Staff had gone through this pretty quickly, but there are no cultural resources in this particular area. We believe that the project will have no impact on the environment, and as staff noted, this is a heavy regulated industry, as you can imagine, and DEQ heavily regulates the environmental portion of this development. There are no streams or wetlands on the site. As I had stated earlier, this project is consistent with the comprehensive plan's goals and guidance. Again, the future land use for this entire particular area is mixed use. The property is currently zoned MU3, and it is located within primary development boundary. Again, this is anticipating future growth, greater future growth in that particular area based on not only your future land use, but also what's been zoned and entitled to date. You've seen this. This is the GDP, which obviously outlines the substation area, the buffering to our south, the stormwater management, which we're required to have, obviously, to our east, the gravel parking area to our west, and the gravel driveway to the site. We have worked very closely with Walton on this project. In fact, Walton has agreed to dedicate the property and not to sell it. Public facilities, proposed rezoning will not impact schools and parks, obviously. The applicant does not believe there will be any additional impacts to fire and rescue services. The closest fire station is Fire Station 11, located about 2.8 miles to the northeast of the site, which will service the property. Transportation, again, very, very minimal transportation impacts, about once a month maintenance and service activity. And again, we're going to provide a 20-foot wide gravel drive to the site. And again, we will dedicate, as required under the prior rezoning, that 60-foot right-of-way along Massaponax Church Road for the future expansion of Massaponax Church Road. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
If I may, I'll ask you the same question I asked staff. Could this, staff says it's going to change the character of the neighborhood, and that's specifically because you'll be able to see it. Right. I was just wondering if it's possible just to move it 30 feet, 40 feet, and use some of the natural terrain to hide this facility.
Well, I would state that, appreciate your question. I think it's a very good question. What we're trying to do is, one, balance that location with not only, the surrounding properties to our east and south, but also where the future development is going to be at Alexander's Crossing. That area is proposed to be townhouses. There's supposed to be open space just to our west and to our north. So we've got to balance what's going to come in the future and what's there today. So we think that we found the best location for that, and also to address our stormwater management requirements, and at the same time, have the access that we have off Massaponax Church Road. And again, I wouldn't per se agree that we're changing the character. I think what we're doing is we are, addressing what that impact would be with the slats and the fencing, with the additional tree lines, with preserving the tree lines, and agreeing to replant where necessary, and at the same time balance what's going to come in the future. So I think that we looked at that. I don't recall that being a super big issue with the neighbors, other than the fact that they wanted to make sure that we were able to buffer it and to do what we can with the fencing, et cetera.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
What is the current need for electricity or power in that area? Because if I'm not mistaken, I drove through there, and Timberlake's the neighborhood that's kind of to the northeast, and there is a substation right along the same line, probably about 1,000 yards north of the facility,
Right.
proposed facility.
Right.
So what's the current need in that area for power, or is this strictly to serve the needs coming for the future of Alexander Crossing?
Well, it's just not Alexander's Crossing that would need this. This is not just per se an Alexander's Crossing substation. This is for the entire, not only to address whatever the needs for today are, but also into the future, not just for Alexander's Crossing, which is the immediate neighborhood, but for the entire area there. And Sam, if you want to address that real quick as well. Sam Wilson with Rappahannock Electric Co-op.
Hello. Sam Wilson, Rappahannock Electric Cooperative, Director of Substation Transmission. Just to let you know, there's like Slabtown Substation is one you're speaking of. And we also have a DSP, which is a distribution step-down point called South Point. And we also have one in Massaponax. So we have one full station and 2 small DSPs. And just in those 3 stations, we're serving 7,000 members already. And just in the subdivisions proposed and already accepted, we have 7,000 more coming. That doesn't matter, that doesn't include other growth. And remember, one thing about Rappahannock is when you think about a customer or somebody, one person coming in and growing, as soon as an industry comes in, that's like 7,000 homes again, just one industry. And with that area growing continuously, we have to meet that demand. We're about around 62 to 65% loaded now on those stations. And we're working with them. We said this is the time to move forward now because it's a good time to work with them and be ready because we know it's coming. And as we know, we're going through there, it's continuously building all through that area. And also, you got the hospital that we want to be proud to be able to provide backup feeds to the hospital, and all the other industries are in that area. So we want to give better reliability to our members today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add that having that utility system in place also helps you market those properties. Let's not forget Alexander's Crossing has 1.5 million square feet of commercial space planned in that particular area.
One quick question on the pond. Any safety concerns there, Mr. Payne, with the detention pond? Neighboring children or access to it? Does a fence go out around it, that sort of thing?
We have fencing around it.
On stormwater management, we do not right now have a fence around that. We'd have to see if it starts to hold water, then we would have to go back and put something around it. We had to do that at our Snell substation. We had to come back and put a fence around it because it did retain water. But if it seeps right through and goes, then we'll be fine with that one.
Okay,
Can I ask a question?
absolutely, Ms. Gardner.
What's the guarantee that you'll do that? I'll take you at your word, but,
Oh, liability and regulations. I mean,
okay,
Rappahannock, we don't want to be standing in court.
that's right. Okay, thank you.
And plus lives means something to us. I mean,
Okay. Yes, I know
not just the
that.
courts. It's,
Yes.
And one other question I have is if Walton is dedicating this property, what does that do to their development as far as density calculations? Is it any changes to that, or is that something that's coming in later, or how does that work?
So they're aware, the big thing is their open space, because their density, they're fine. With their open space, that was shown as part of their open space, but they were showing more green area on the GDP than what the minimum that was actually proffered. So they know they're going to have to make up for that.
And do we have a chance to see that again? Is that through a site plan? I just want to understand the process. If this is taken out of their tract, how does that affect affect them if we have a
So
chance
we
to?
would see a preliminary plat. You would see a preliminary plat when Alexander's Crossing starts to develop.
Okay,
Yeah, of course, we couldn't increase density, and we anticipated that we would likely need some sort of utility improvement on site for purposes of the development, just the size of it.
no, okay. Very well, any other questions for Mr. Payne at this point? Yes, Mr. Medina?
As far as Walton goes, and as far actually their development on property, is there any update on timetable when that project may begin? So we'll get a feel for when the preliminary plat may come in for a section?
I can just tell you they're actively marketing the property, both residential and commercial. And we've had, quite honestly, we've had a lot of attention more on the commercial side than we had on the residential side.
That's good. That's what we want.
Mr. Newhouse, there is design standards manual requirement for fencing around detention ponds based on the proximity to a residential property, so they would have to comply with
Okay,
that.
thank you.
That will come up at site plan stage.
Yep, okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point? All right, I'll open the public hearing for a comment, if anybody wishes to speak on the project. Okay, hearing none, I'll close the public hearing portion, and if there are no other questions or comments, I'll take a motion on the application.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve SUP 17-004, Walton, Virginia, Rappahannock Electric, Masponic Church Road Substation with conditions.
Second.
Any other questions or comments at this point? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next application, R17-0007, Benchmark Road Investments.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This case is located within the Battlefield Voting District. It is a request for the rezoning of 18.867 acres from R1, or Residential 1, to PDH2, Planned Development Housing 2, with proffers to allow for 29 single-family detached residential units. The properties are located within the primary development boundary. They're identified for low-density residential development per the comprehensive plan. Staff is recommending approval of this case with proffers dated October 18th, 2017. The location of these properties are on Mine Road, approximately 750 feet west of the intersection of Mine Road and Lansdowne Road. They're shown in red before you. That little orange dot indicates another electrical substation that's located immediately east of one of these 5 parcels. Just to the southeast is the Mine Road Convenience Center. The proposed properties, as I noted, are zoned R1, as are all other properties within the immediate area. The applicant has proffered a generalized development plan shown before you, depicting the proposal. The proposal consists of a 28-lot neighborhood and a remnant lot 29, which I've highlighted in green. This lot 29 is currently improved with an existing residential structure, which has access to Mine Road via a private roadway called Auburn Lane. Auburn Lane provides access to at least 2 other properties in addition to the home on lot 29. And no changes are proposed to Auburn Lane except for the dedication of a small amount of right-of-way near the intersection of Mine Road and Auburn Lane to accommodate future potential efforts to widen Mine Road. You also see on this image a small triangle in the top left corner, which indicates a portion of the Battle of Fredericksburg II historical area. There are no improvements proposed there. It lies within Parcel C, which is one of the parcels that it will be preserved on this property for open space purposes. Zooming in a little closer on the actual subdivision of Afton, you can see there are 28 lots, exclusive of lot 29. Those 28 lots range in size from 6,000 to 12,000 square feet. They're all accessed from 2 proposed VDOT maintained roadways. They're labeled currently as Street A and Street B. The spine, if you will connect to Mine Road, and a spur is proposed off of it, which will provide future access to the development of an abutting parcel to the west, should it be further developed in the future. The spur was required by VDOT for secondary street acceptance requirement purposes. Residents and guests driving into the neighborhood will have both a right turn lane or a left turn lane into the property. Both of those turn lanes consist of a 100-foot storage lane with a 100-foot taper. The new internal streets will have dual sidewalks, and a frontage sidewalk is proposed by the applicant, as are right-of-way dedications to accommodate the new turn lanes and for future improvements within the envisioned 120-foot right-of-way in Mine Road. A 20-foot street buffer B is also proposed along the frontage of the development. Because of the limited amount of trips proposed with this development, a traffic impact analysis was not required by VDOT nor voluntarily provided by the applicant. County staff, however, worked with our transportation engineer using our own traffic modeling software to determine existing levels of service on Mine Road. They were determined to be D and C during AM and PM periods respectively. Using the sheriff's crash data, we were also able to determine this stretch of roadway is not a high accident location. The estimated 310 vehicle trips that would result from this development and the additional development of the spur, the property that spur connects to, are not expected to have any significant impacts on Mine Road. We believe that they are mitigated by the proposed left and right inbound turn lanes.
Patrick, if you'd back up that slide,
Backing
please. The traffic, the level of service, please. So the C and D is existing
Yes.
condition, and was the model rerun with this traffic data in it, with the trips generated?
310 trips?
Yeah.
I'm confident of that, yes.
It was rerun, it was rerun.
With the 310 trips?
Yeah, any changes to the level of service?
No.
No changes, okay.
Staff conducted a fiscal impact analysis. In addition, one was provided by the applicant. The applicant's fiscal impact analysis reported that the development should generate $44,000 annually in revenue to the county. The county's model, we have our own model also, that it predicted an annual deficit of $28,000. It's important to note that these models frequently differ because they're based on different assumptions. The applicants typically take into account more off-site and what we call spin-off effects, notably an off-site job generation from the additional on-site residents' demands for products and services. Staff also looked at the comprehensive plan. This slide summarizes the findings. The development's found to be generally consistent with land use, transportation, public facilities, historic resources, and natural resources. The applicant's proffered contributions to fire and park services in accordance with Virginia codes. Staff is confident those contributions are legally acceptable, and staff did observe impacts exceeding capacity thresholds at Fire Station 4 and Massaponax High School, although no proffer could be sought due to the new proffer legislation. Well, when we look at these proffers, when we look at impacts, we look at them as detailed in your staff report. We look at them on a variety of different things. There's levels of service that are noted in the comprehensive plan. And when there is a capacity concern at one of those public facilities, then the county can explore collecting a cash proffer if it's one of 4 types of public facilities: fires, schools, parks, transportation. And if there's a project that we can identify that will happen in the predictable future that would have an impact or a benefit to a proposed project, then that is something that perhaps the applicant can propose a legal proffer for. If there's not a project that's identified that would have a material impact, we can't, then there's no reasonable proffer we can accept.
So the other way of saying it, if the applicant offers a proffer, we can't accept it.
And that's happened before.
I know it has.
That
Yeah.
is just what's coming in the General Assembly.
That's right. That's quite all right, ma'am. So back to the proffers, there's really these two types. There's on-site and off-site. There's a lot that a developer can propose on-site. In this case, the applicant has proposed conformance with the GDP. They've proffered out any of the secondary uses that the PDH2 zoning district could allow. They've proffered homeowners association that would include covenants and restrictions to keep a quality neighborhood. They've proffered the right-in lane and the dedication of right-of-way, and they've proffered nearly 8 acres of open space. Off-site or cash proffers, we were able to work with the developer to find, the developer provided cash proffers indicated before you, approximately a little over $46,000 for fire and rescue, and a little over $116 per unit for Parks and Rec, summing out to be just over $2,600. So, in summary, the Afton project was generally consistent with the comprehensive plan with respect to land use, transportation, public facilities, historic and natural resources, goals, and policies. The applicant proffered cash contributions in order to mitigate those impacts which were attributable to the project and which were legally acceptable by the board and the planning commission per the parameters established in the Virginia Code. The Afton project will provide right-in and left-in turning lanes in order to provide safe turning movements into the development and allow passing traffic to freely continue. There are also some findings against. The county's model did indicate a deficit of approximately $28,000 annually. Again, I report that the applicant's own financial analysis indicates that the project would have a positive contribution of $44,000 annually. The Afton project is expected to generate approximately 5 high school students. Those high school students would hypothetically go to Massaponax High School. We do know that Massaponax High School is currently over capacity. The proximity of the Battle of Historic Fredericksburg 2, which we identified on site, indicates that there's a chance there could be some archaeological resources on the property. No cultural resources study has been completed. And lastly, although Lot 29 is kind of a disassociated piece of this neighborhood, it's a little unique. It remains disconnected, but even if it was connected to the neighborhood, Auburn Lane wouldn't be going there anywhere. Anyway, it provides access to other homes. So kind of an unusual case. Staff is recommending approval of the rezoning with proffers. I'll stand by for your questions, and I know the applicant has a presentation as well.
Lot 29 is a single-family home,
It is currently a single-family home
and it will
now.
always be a single-family home. There's no other future development for Lot 29.
I don't foresee it. I mean, Lot 29 is part of this rezoning. It's being rezoned to BDH2. It would have the same proffered conditions that the remainder of the lots have on them, which include no secondary uses. So it would remain a single-family home or any other permitted use in the PDH2 zoning district.
All right, and then the connector road coming off the spline is for future development on the abutting parcel. Is that?
That's
how I understand that?
accurate.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Patrick? Yeah,
Yes.
Mr. Bullock?
Why do you say it's an unusual project?
Because of the remnant. I will confess, I have not done many rezonings, but this is one that I believe, typically when a rezoning's the whole project and doesn't include a piece on the side that's disconnected. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Payne?
Mr. Chairman and other members of the Planning Commission, my name is Charlie Payne, law firm Hersher Fleischer, and we represent the applicant. I too, Patrick, struggle with proffers, especially the current statute, but we will try to get through those, and I'll address the question about Lot 29. It's not per se a remnant, it's part of the overall development, and I'll explain that in further details. As staff has stated, this is part of 5 parcels, includes a total of 18.87 acres. Lot 29 is part of 24-5-2, and I'll get to that when we get to the GDP. The property is located along Mine Road, and it is west of the intersection of Mine Road and Lansdowne Road. It is currently zoned R1, and we are proposing a PDH2 rezoning. Under the PDH rezoning for these 29 units, it's 2 units to the acre. Our density actually is going to be about 1.537 units to the acre. If you think about Lee's Hill, I think it's section 1C, that's about 1.67 acres to the acre. It's not too far from us, basically right across the street. The comp plan for this particular area proposes 4 units to the acre, so low-density residential. So we're well below the comprehensive plan. We're below the PDH2 zoning district, and we're in accordance with similar properties around us. We've also proposed 41% open space, which exceeds the open space requirements by 11%. The minimum is 30, and I'll get to that as well in a little bit. We're anticipating a 3-year build-out of these lots, these 29 lots in that corridor. That's a fairly popular corridor. There's not a whole lot of new residential housing stock, so this should also be a benefit to that particular area. And also, it's important to note that by right, we could do 13 units. So this is just a plus 16 yield on the rezoning. Surrounding properties, as I stated, are very similar. Single-family detached home at Lee's headquarters. Also, south across Mine Road at Lee's Hill Residential Subdivision. As I stated, they're about 1.67 units to the acre. To the east is a Dominion substation and utility area, and Artillery Ridge is also nearby. North is also single-family homes and some vacant property and undeveloped. And again, we've got extensive buffering planned, and we'll get to that, and I'll show you that in the GDP. Patrick touched on this a little bit, but I want to go through some of the cultural resources, environmental resources. There's no wetlands or streams on the site. Our property does not have, per se, any cultural resources, including cemeteries, and is not located within the County Historic Overlay District. As Patrick had noted, there's a little triangular piece in our open space that does include part of the Battle Fredericksburg Historic District Overlay that will not be disturbed, and that will be preserved into perpetuity. Comprehensive plan, as staff has noted, this project is consistent with the comprehensive plan. As I noted earlier, this is a low-density development, residential development, future use, which is about 4 units to the acre. We're well below that, about 1.57, and is located in the primary development boundary, which encourages greater density, and we can connect to public facilities. And here's the GDP. I don't have a pointer, but you can see to the, I would say, north, past the cul-de-sac, the open space there. It's open space C, and it goes all the way to the corner there. That was part of the tax map parcel that was what is now Lot 29, and we're utilizing all of that area for the open space to buffer our development from our neighbors, and to also obviously protect the resource in the corner. So Lot 29 isn't per se standalone. It is part of the overall development, and we're utilizing that particular tax map parcel for purposes of having the open space area.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does the open space, as it wraps down around to the south, heading east, is that still part of your open space calculation?
I believe it is.
Where that connector road comes in, I'm wondering why we have that road, to be honest with you. Why that's required here, if that's open space.
That's actually a,
You see what I'm talking about? Or is that a separate parcel?
that's a separate parcel owned by someone else, and VDOT made me tie that road in.
Okay.
Stub parcel there. That's not part of this development.
All right, so there's a property line right there that divides the two. Okay, I got it.
Yes.
And just for the record, there's Lee Garrison, who's the applicant.
Yes.
And also, we have a neighbor that utilizes Auburn Lane, that if we cut that off, they wouldn't be able to get out. So we're going to keep that in place so they can utilize that as well.
So you have a neighbor, say that again.
They're where? To the The neighbor is to your, on lot 29 that uses Auburn Lane.
I don't know how I can point, this uses.
It's, see how it curves back past
Oh, I got it.
lot
Okay.
29?
Yes, thank
The
you.
Bradshaw property.
Yep.
And then that parcel was created a long time ago, so Auburn Lane, parcels back there have access to it, so it was already there to begin with, and that's why we're leaving it.
So if that abutting lot is developed, then VDOT wouldn't allow you access onto Mine Road. You'd have to use your proposed. I'm back to that separate parcel.
It's a separate parcel, right, they would have to, the VDOT's doing that for future planning, they wouldn't have access to Mine Road.
Perfect, thank you.
So just hopefully I didn't confuse anybody, but basically that's why lot 29 is kind of standalone. We're capturing several things, including help on the neighbors and the open space.
I'm gonna take this out of Mr. Payne's time, so I'll just go ahead.
That's just one entrance, am I right?
Yes.
Okay, great, okay. Praise the Lord.
Just to
Just wanted to give him a
the
little
fiscal benefits, real quick, Patrick, I don't want to lose my, I'm just kidding. We estimate that the home prices will be anywhere from $300,000 to $350,000 and about average 2,500 square feet, finished above grade. We also, we utilize a different model than the county. The county just looks at the assessed values and they kind of run the model based on comparables in the area. We get the county assessor to bump up to the sales prices. We may be able to be on the same page. But they also don't take into account off-site ripple effects of folks who move into this community. I mean, they buy groceries, they buy goods, they buy services. So that does have a positive benefit. So that overall analysis does show a $44,000 on the plus side. We showed only about a $4,000 on the negative side on site. So again, this is all, they use assessed values, we use purchase values. So that's the difference. Schools, this is located in the Spotsylvania Elementary, Battlefield Middle, and Massaponax High School districts. Right now, the current generation, pupil generation is 0.572. This project will generate, my recollection, 16 school-age children, and by right, it would generate 13. I'm sorry, 13 units would generate 8 students. There is adequate capacity to accommodate these students. Transportation, as we stated earlier, all access will be from Mine Road. We do have a left and right turn lane proposed for the site. The applicant will also dedicate right-of-way totaling about a width of 125 feet. That's extraordinarily important, as I know the county is now studying that corridor for future improvements, and right-of-way acquisition is one of the largest costs, as you can imagine. The 29 units will generate 22 peak-hour trips and 29 peak-hour trips, and 22 peak-hour trips in the AM and 29 in the PM. So not a whole lot of traffic from this site. Public safety, the proposal will have minimal impact on the county's fire and rescue facilities. Fire Station 4, which is about 1.5 miles away from the site, will service this site. There's no new fire stations planned to be built till 2021, and I think that's Fire Station 12. But there is a new fire and rescue training center being constructed in 2018, which we'll contribute to with our proffers. Here are the proffers, right turn lane off of Mine Road at the proposed subdivision entrance, and it'll include 100-foot storage and 100-foot taper. Note, we will have a left turn lane as well, so that is required for purposes of the project. Again, we've also making the right-of-way dedication, as I noted, for our total 125 feet, which is very important, I know, for expansion of that area, and that's quite a significant area. It's about 1.9 plus acres. Cash proffers total of $2,600 is $46.38 a unit for the public safety and $116.13 for the Parks and Rec. And again, that's an analysis that is firmly structured under the new statute, which, as you all know, I'm not a big fan of. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions you have.
Any questions or comments at this time? Very well, thank you. I'll open the public
Thank you, Mr.
hearing to any public comment at this point for or against the project. Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. If there are no other questions or comments, I'll take a motion on the application.
I would like to make a motion that we approve R17-007 Benchmark Road Investments, LLC.
I have a second on the,
Just a moment, may I?
absolutely.
Second, oh, that's right, I can second it. and then
You
we
can
have to-
second, then we'll comment. So we have a second?
So we have, yes,
Okay, we have a second.
and so we have a left-hand turn lane, a right-hand turn lane, and we only have one exit and one entrance, correct? Because along that road, there's so many houses that are being built, and it's a driveway at each one of them, which is very, very dangerous. And just, I want to make sure that we have the left-hand turn lane, the right-hand turn lane, and that we only have one. That's good. Thank you.
If there are no other comment, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. Motion passes. Moving on to R17-0008.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Me again. This case is located in the Berkeley voting district. It is a request to rezone just under 2 acres from RU, or rural, to industrial 2 with proffers to allow for certain uses permitted in the I-2 zoning district. The proposed use is a heavy equipment and specialized vehicle sale, rental, and/or service establishment. The property is located within the primary development boundary. It is identified for employment center development as according to the future land use map and the comprehensive plan, as are surrounding properties. Staff is recommending approval with proffers dated September 27th, 2017. Now, this property, as shown in red, is located about a half of a mile south of the intersection of Route 1 and Massaponax Church Road. The site is also approximately 750 feet north of the intersection of Guinea Station Road and Route 1. Zooming in, this slide depicts the proffered GDP, which includes a 4,000 square foot office in the center of the site, towards the front. At the rear of the property is an enclosed 34,000 square foot outdoor storage and display area. The green overlays depict provided screening consisting of a street buffer E along the frontage and a half section of the transitional screen 3 along existing vacant property abutting to the north, west, and southwest. Near the parking lot along the front of the site, you can also see a proposed interparcel connection to both the southern and northern abutting properties. Closer to the front of the site, you can see the proposed sidewalk and a right-of-way dedication in accordance with the county's comprehensive plan's transportation goals for the future widening of Route 1. You can also see a proposed 100-foot turn lane with a 200-foot taper at the north of the site. Those are for southbound right turn ins. No traffic impact analysis was required by VDOT nor voluntarily provided by the applicant. The proposal is predicted to add approximately 134 vehicles per day. The right-in turn lane of 100 feet with 200 feet taper is proposed by the applicant. VDOT is expected but has not yet issued an access management exception waiver at the site. It is expected that that will be applied for and received during the site plan phase. VDOT did indicate that they were interested in seeing those interparcel connections to mitigate that request.
Patrick, do you have how the 134 vehicles per day was generated? What's the calculation behind that number?
Those are based on the Institute of Traffic Engineers.
Is that so? Is that sales or is that equipment coming in and out? I mean, what constitutes that 134 trips?
Well, I don't know that the cat's out of the bag that they can discuss who they intend to have here, but I think when the applicants to speak, that will become a lot more clear. So staff reviewed this in accordance with the comprehensive plan, and found it generally consistent with land use, transportation, historic, natural resources elements as detailed within your staff report. Staff supports the proffered GDP conformance, the proffering out of 2 I-2 uses, specifically the feed mill and the industrial 2 permitted uses. And lastly, the proffered right-of-way dedication. The following are findings in favor of this rezoning. The zoning designation of I-2 is consistent with the Employment Center future land use designation. The proposed use would be compatible with the neighboring uses and the general development pattern of that area. The rezoning is supportive of county business expansion goals, and it will increase the non-residential tax base of the county. The applicant redesigned their site at staff's request to pull the building forward and push the storage yard to the rear. Staff also found, well, these are the findings against. Staff also found that there's nothing preventing the development of this project from developing as proposed using the I-1 district. There are other properties in the immediate area which are zoned I-1, and the proposed use desired by the applicant is available as a permitted use in the I-1 zoning district. This was encouraged to the applicant, but not agreed upon. Lastly, the property is located within the Highway Corridor Overlay District, which is good. That overlay district typically triggers additional architectural requirements, but that overlay district exempts out industrially zoned properties. So without a proffer of a building elevation or the HCOD, there's a little uncertainty as to what the building will look like. Thankfully, or mitigating this, there is a street buffer E, which is the thickest street buffer the county has available, proposed separating the building from the street. Staff's recommend approval with proffers dated September 27th, 2017. I know the applicant has a presentation, but I will stand by for your questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Patrick, are you saying that we don't know what's going in there?
We know what's depicted on the GDP, and that is for a heavy equipment sale, a rental, or service establishment. As to whether or not the exact name of that tenant has been released, I'm not certain. That cat is out of the bag.
I'm not worried about the name.
Yeah,
But
no.
are you saying that it's going to create how many vehicles a day?
134 vehicle trips per day are estimated.
So when we say vehicles, are we talking about cars, or are we talking about heavy equipment?
Bigger than cars.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but are we talking about tracking trailers, bringing heavy equipment in there? What are we talking about?
Not that.
I'm just curious because we have a school right there.
That's right.
Yes, I understand. I believe that if you'll just bear with me for a moment when the applicant makes their presentation, if they're able to, they'll tell you the name of this potential tenant, and this will be a lot more clear.
Yeah, we'll wait for the applicant. I don't care about the name, but we want to know the use, because
Understood.
that's in our purview. Anyway. Yes, Mr. Medina.
And Patrick, I just want to make sure, so the proposed rezoning to I-2 would not be necessary for the proposed use of the applicant? And your findings against, that's what I was trying to figure, your first bullet and your findings against.
It could be accomplished by just the I-1, it doesn't, the I-2 doesn't provide much.
Mr. Barnes.
Patrick, I know that the I-2 is exempt from the HCOD, which architecturally, my question is, with the buffer that they provided, how does that, if it wasn't exempt from the HCOD, put the architectural thing aside for a minute, does the buffer there touch on it at all? Because you said something earlier that at staff's recommendation, they were able to do that. But the HCOD is important, but, it's exempt from the I-2, but, so we can't undo that. But how much does the buffering on the proposed GDP touch on what the HCOD requirements would be?
Well, the HCOD requirements I was getting to that we're missing out on here are, of course, the building ones. The street buffer E, while it is a buffer, it also keeps in mind that businesses that are located on streets need to be somewhat visible to survive, to hopefully thrive. The street buffer E at 30 feet would consist of 12 canopy trees and six smaller understory trees per 100 feet. So I would imagine that it's not a transitional screening buffer. It's not that thick. It provides some aesthetics. It limits.
Okay, you've answered it.
Thank you.
No other questions? We'll hear from the applicant.
I feel like it's kind of deja vu, Mr. Chairman. Charlie Payne with the law firm Herschel Fleischer. Appreciate your time this evening, represent the applicant. I'm hoping that I don't mix up all of these projects. But appreciate staff's presentation, and I'll answer some of the questions that came up. I think there were some good questions, and just from the beginning of this, we have been negotiating and marketing a particular entity that would obviously be office, storage, and rentals. And it's, consumer rentals mostly, group, as you can imagine who that might be. So that's who we've been primarily marketing to. Now, Patrick is correct that would be covered under I-1. However, if we don't get them, especially in this particular area on Route 1, I'm sure you're familiar with some of the uses that are around us and some of the developments around us. It has not had a whole lot of new investment in a while, so it's difficult to attract a user there if we don't get this one. So we want as much flexibility as we possibly can, so the I-2 gives us that flexibility. I think it's also important to understand the constraints of the site. It's not a very big site. It's less than 2 acres. And we still have access issues we'd have to deal with, irrelevant of the use, just because of the size. We have addressed the interparcel connection requirements that VDOT wanted us to tackle, as well as the county, for future development, both to our north and south. So the trips are actually based on a higher usage than what we're anticipating, just because we wanted that I-2 coverage. So the 134 trips would be based on something that would be much higher than what we think is going to come to the site. I don't know if that answers your question. So we've taken all that into account for those purposes.
I'm sorry, I guess my question is, of the 134 trips, what does that constitute? Because if I understand the ITE correctly, it's just an average trip generation calculation based off the use. But I'm more interested in how does that break down to customers and to our concern, heavy equipment coming in and out of there?
Yeah, we used it's an ITE 841 number, which is new car sales. So that has a fairly heavy traffic generation. And we utilize that because we're not quite sure whether we're going to get this deal or not. But if we don't, we want to be able to address it a little higher. But even given all of that, the site alone, just because of its size, there's so much we can put on the site, especially with parking requirements and setback requirements, et cetera. So we're fairly limited. The footprint you see is a very limited footprint and pretty much what it's going to be. Just no matter who the user is, that's what it's going to look like. I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry that I can't give you more details on it.
Well, that's okay, but the concern that I have is with the nearby school, and when I hear 134 trips,
Yeah.
if we're talking heavy equipment, school buses, all that good stuff, it's a concern.
I can't control VDOT's ITE model. I can just tell you that I doubt it'd be half those trips based on what we're thinking is going to go in there. And even anything that would be when I say a larger user, a more intense user, again, because of the constraints of the site, I just don't see the trips being any higher than that.
Okay. Yes.
Do we know the approximate times of the trips between hours?
For the proposed use, it could be any time, just because of the fact that, and I'm trying to be careful about how I say this without letting the cat out of the bag, but for a typical storage facility or rental company, including rental of trucks or cars or what the case may be, it could be any time. It's just not going to be during certain peak hours. It's like school mornings, for example. It'll be spread out through the day, is what I'm trying to say. So I hope I answered your question. I'm sorry. Sorry that I'm not trying to be evasive. I'm just trying to cover a couple of things on the same time.
I just echo what the chairman said. I'm just concerned about the school there.
I think it's fair to say that we'll be consistent with the uses that are around there from a traffic generation perspective. Is that fair to say? You got pick apart there. You got a gas propane station, propane cells. You got it's going to be very consistent with those uses.
On the vehicle sale, looking at your plan, there won't be any displays out in front, correct? There's no room for that. So,
right.
Okay, and then on the service
This will be a
part-
destination, this will be a destination location.
Got it, okay. And then on the service part of this, that is just general maintenance service, or
Yes.
repairs, major repairs and stuff like that are not in the plan here?
No.
Okay,
Yeah, and the applicant's here as well. Got him down, he's a fireman up in Prince William County, so we dragged him down here this evening. So this is his first time at a public forum, so take it easy on him, but.
oh, we'd rather beat up on you,
Yeah,
so
beat up
that's
on me.
okay.
I'm the one who usually has a target on me, so feel free. But,
No, we're just trying to understand, you know, the safety aspect of this and what we can expect for
I hear
the
you, and I
traffic,
wish I could
so.
give you more, but I assure you, I say I assure you, the anticipation is that the usage, including the anticipated trips, will not be any greater than what is currently uses around us right now.
Okay.
That's my anticipation.
Okay,
And again, we want the flexibility. We just, you know, that area is really tough to market to, but we see this as a future opportunity. And just real quickly, as we had stated, is, you know, it's less than 2 acres. We are, you know, the location, it's south of Route 1 and Massachusetts Church Road. It's not developed, hasn't been developed for a very long time. An old house sat on it for a very long time, so we're going to develop it, which may encourage some development around us. We are proposing an I-2 rezoning, and offices and outdoor storage and rentals is our preference here. Open space will be used, obviously, for stormwater management facilities and buffering. As staff had noted, we're set back pretty good. We did get a lot of push from VDOT and the county about these interparcel connections, which we did provide. I think that's important for purposes of a central location for access for the future for properties to our north and south. We anticipate if this thing does happen, it's going to happen in about 12 or 18 months if this is approved. And it is within the HCOD, but because it's I-2, we're not going to be subject to the HCOD design standards. Again, those standards are wonderful in certain locations of the county, but I think in this particular location where you're trying to attract investment, including commercial uses and industrial uses, it gets a little challenging. I'll also just like to state for futures, a comprehensive plan, this is an employment center area. This is supposed to have industry and heavy employment. So I just want to make sure that we understand that. Again, the surrounding areas to the south, as I stated, is a propane gas sales facility. To our west is vacant land. We've got a small engine repair shop nearby. Immediate north is vacant land. Used car sales lot not too far from us. They're popping up everywhere in Spotsylvania County. And there are currently no existing residents in the vicinity. Cultural resources, environmental, no wetland streams are immediate adjacent to the site, nor is there an RPA, so that's good news, and no cultural resources on the site, and this is not within the county's historic overlay district. As I stated, with the comprehensive plan, it does conform to the county's comprehensive plan standards. This is an employment center area, as many of you probably know, and encourages industrial use. It's currently zoned RU, which is not the highest and best use for this site. The project does have similar commercial uses in the area. I think this would be a positive transition for planning. The project will improve Route 1, and we will dedicate some right-of-way, which is always a plus in that particular area. And as we stated, there will be a right turn lane into the site with a 100-foot taper and 100-foot storage. Project does further multiple objectives of the comp plan, including assistance with that 70-30 mix that we're always trying to tackle, including 30% tax revenues generated by commercial uses and creation of new jobs. And again, the property is located within a primary development boundary, which encourages higher intense uses, and we will be able to connect to public water and sewer. Here's a copy of the GDP, which you've seen. You see the right turn lane along Route 1 into the site. You see the interparcel connections I was talking about, and the site is fairly set back, as you can see. Transportation, the property does abut Route 1, and access will be to Route 1. The roads construction of the project will be properly maintained to the extent there are any. Most are going to be travelways. We talked about the vehicles per day. Here is the AM and PM peak hours. We do have those. 11, and this is just based on the ITE VDOT model, 11 during the PM and 9 during AM peak hours and 11 during PM. And Saturdays would be about 12. Again, very low intensity. Public facilities, the proposed zoning will not impact schools or parks, certainly from a financial perspective. The proposal will have minimal impact on the county's fire and rescue. The Thornburg Fire and Rescue Station will serve this area, and it's about 3.5 miles away. Proffers, this is a commercial project, so it's not subject to the new statute for residential uses, but we will provide, we will proffer out certain uses of feed mill and the industry type 2 uses, which are the industry type 2 use being fairly intense. In the transportation, we will dedicate the right-of-way of over 4,000 square feet, as I had stated, along Route 1, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And I appreciate your patience in dealing with me on three projects.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Payne?
Yeah,
Ms. Carter?
well, this is just for staff, that's okay. What is feed meal?
Well, I don't have the exact definition. I'll be glad to look it up if you'll give me a moment. But I imagine that to be a mill that processes grain or agricultural feed of some type.
Animal feed.
Animal feed.
Processes animal feed.
I just wondered why that was chosen. I
Well-
mean, we just have two entities that's been proffered out, and I need a list of sometime, I'm not saying now, of the uses that is in I-2.
I can read them to you real quick.
I have the list. I can display you the list, and I can tell you why they selected those two uses.
Yes.
Those two uses are the only two permitted uses that are allowed in the I-2 zoning district, but not allowed in the I-1. So by proffering those two uses out, the applicant is trying to assure you of, trying to give us a greater level of comfort with the rezoning request.
So you're saying that what's allowed in I-1 is allowed in I-2, all but those two uses?
The by right uses, yes, ma'am. There are additional special uses which are available in the I-2 zoning district, but not in the I-1, and I have a list of those also.
They're very similar type. You can only get to a certain intense use under I-2, but they're very similar. And quite honestly, give us a wider scope of opportunities to attract something to that site if we strike out on this deal. But I'm confident we're going to be able to get this done.
Just maybe to set your mind at ease, this parcel is quite small. It's just under 2 acres.
Yeah.
And the additional uses that are allowed by special use permit that wouldn't be allowed if they were I-1 is a short list of pretty larger land uses. And real briefly, industrial type 3, landfill, motor freight terminal, public utility heavy, recycling plant. The only two that could possibly fit on a site this size that are special uses in the I-2 but not the I-1 are a junkyard and a motor, a junkyard and an auto graveyard. And we don't expect those here. If the applicant intended to go down that path, we'd be before you again for a special use for one of those uses on a very small piece of property.
They will require a special use permit. We're not presenting that. Again, Patrick makes a really good point. I mean, just tractor trailers have a hard time maneuvering in that site, and plus you can't even park it for purposes of large manufacturing.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? I will open it up for the public hearing. Any questions or? Very well, I'll close the public hearing. Any other questions or comments? At this point, I'll take a motion on the application.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to delay R17-008 to the next meeting. I still got some questions
Very well.
that I'd like to talk to the applicant about.
So,
We will, I assume, have a meeting in 2 weeks?
December the 6th,
Yeah, so we're scheduled to have a meeting, correct?
yes.
So the board,
So put
please,
it on
I'd
the-
like to at least delay it to the next meeting.
all right, so we'll need a motion do we need a motion to delay? I guess we do.
Yes,
So-
a motion to continue the vote until December the 6th.
And the public hearing is closed, though. Correct. So I'll take a second on that motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Next item up is the work session for Renewable Energy Comprehensive Plan Amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One more time, this is a request for a public hearing initiation. Following the Planning Commission's recommended approval of Ordinance CA 17-9, the Board of Supervisors approved the code amendment to allow solar energy facilities by special use permit in the RU, A2, and A3 zoning districts. And that was just last week. The Planning Commission will be required to conduct a review of any new solar energy facility to test whether or not that facility is in substantial accord with the comprehensive plan. A similar process occurs each year when we come before you with new additions to the capital improvement plan, and we refer to this as the 2232 review in reference to Virginia Code 152-2232. This amendment, or this request, is to initiate public hearings for a series of four amendments, 4 chapters that are being amended within the comprehensive plan in order to provide guidance when conducting that 2232 review. Those 4 chapters are the introduction and vision, land use, historic resources, and natural resources. In the introduction and vision element or chapter, we propose to add the underlined text before you into guiding principles and policies A. Oh, I was just looking for eye contact, and then I was going to move on to the next one. I'd be glad to read them all.
We don't even know what's going on.
Whatever you'd prefer.
You're actually not changing the introduction, you're just adding these components.
That's correct. That's correct, sir. We are proposing to add this language that's underlined into that element, the guiding principles and policies within the introduction and vision section. That is chapter 1 that we're looking to change.
Back up a slide, if you would, please, Patrick. One more. So these are, we're talking zones RU, A2, and A3.
Yes, sir.
And these, want to help me here, these are relatively large tracts of land.
Correct. The RU, A2, and A3 zoning districts cover a very large portion of the county, and they do tend to be larger tracts of land. They are allowed to be divided for residential uses, but larger size lots. So these are primarily outside of our primary development boundary. These are typically lots that would be served by well and septic as a general statement.
So when I look at data processing centers, if I understand that item correctly, these are very large facilities.
Right, and actually this item here that's proposed to be added is not specifically related to the solar energy facilities. What we wanted to do was, rather than just mention solar energy facilities specifically in the comprehensive plan, because currently they're not mentioned at all.
But
So what we wanted to take was a broader approach to encompass a number of types of renewable energy generation facilities and other uses that we might see in the future, and that way we have them acknowledged in our comprehensive plan. So this statement here is a very broad statement that applies to the whole county.
Okay, thank you. Proceed.
Let's look at the next one. Within that same chapter, Introduction and Vision, Guiding Principles and Policies is another goal. The 4th goal states that agriculture and silviculture are valued components of Spotsylvania County's economy. And we're proposing to add this language underneath one of these. There are a number of policies that are then listed that are supportive of agriculture and silviculture. We're proposing to add the underlined text as a new policy.
I'm looking up silviculture.
Water-based agriculture.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you.
All up on me.
The next chapter we're proposing to add language to is the land use chapter. And at the very beginning of the land use chapter of the comprehensive plan are land use policies that are applicable to every land use. And then that chapter goes on to describe different land uses such as employment center or mixed use or low-density residential that you're familiar with. This text that is underlined before you is being proposed at the very front end of that element and would be applied or applicable to all land uses. This is one that we want to use when we're reviewing these solar farms and we're talking, or other uses that get a comprehensive plan review. And then this will allow staff to opine whether or not that proposal is meeting or not meeting this element and can be used to support or not support a future project.
Are you all familiar with all of this? You know what all of these words mean? I don't.
I wrote them with help. With help from these two over here and other people of our staff, yeah.
I had to look up silviculture.
And if you see one, I'd be glad to define it or make it up the best I can.
Some of it you can't even pronounce.
All right, keep going.
All right, yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
The second to last chapter we're proposing to amend is historic resources. The second policy within that element states the county should support projects that consider and mitigate the impact of development projects on historic and cultural resources through rezoning, special use, and capital project planning processes. Well, we wanted to add a new item 5 or new policy 5 that says new development should cause no significant visual detriment to historic or cultural resources. And while we were in this element, we noticed that the special use was not referenced in policy or strategy 3, so we're adding that in as in addition, since we're here.
So I would interpret that to be subjective.
Yes, sir, that is subjective. The comprehensive plan is a pretty broad and subjective document.
But when you say cause no significant visual detriment, that to me is very subjective because what's significant to you may not be to me, correct?
I agree with that. You and the Board of Supervisors?
But you would come forward with a recommendation that,
Oh, yes.
I mean, you would have that recommendation as to what you feel is a significant visual detriment.
Yeah, yes, that's correct, sir. In the comprehensive analysis section of a future solar energy facility, perhaps, or perhaps it's a new telecommunication tower or anything that's getting a comprehensive plan review, this item would be looked at by staff.
So how do we gauge that? What's our metrics?
Well,
I mean, it's very open, it's very subjective to me, that the way that's phrased. What's to keep an applicant, from having an issue with is so subjective to me. I'm not comfortable with that language there.
All right. Maybe that's one perhaps we will look at further. I understand that you believe that's too subjective, and we'll look to make some changes to it.
And I'm interested in terms of protecting the county as well here, because it's, again, as I stated it, what's a significant visual impact to you, detriment to you, may not be to me or to an applicant. Am I missing the boat?
Well, this is a policy, and so it's not going to be structured like a code. It's not going to, it is going to be somewhat subjective because each application is going to be different and each historic resource that might be impacted is going to be different. So we would go through this is just exactly what we do right now in every case.
Yeah.
We consult with the National Park Service or with the Department of Historic Resources. The applicant might submit a cultural resources study. So all of that goes into it, and what we typically would do, and just to use the solar energy facilities as an example, if there was a national park adjacent to one of these proposals, we would look to have some buffering that would ensure that it was not visually impacting on the park, that you couldn't see the solar facility from the park. And then we would say, yes, then we feel this does meet this policy. So it is going to be somewhat subjective and open, but ultimately it's the Board of Supervisors that makes the determination
Okay.
that they feel that it's been satisfied. And again, it's a guide, it's a policy. So this
Well,
is
and
just to give us some negotiating power as we work through the projects.
That's all well and good, and then, you know, as I sit here thinking about it, to be consistent with the application of it as well, would be a concern of mine that, you know, I don't know how we do that the way this is phrased, but I understand your point. Yes, Mr. Burns.
This, I'm gonna just put something in that, what you're talking about in context of something we dealt with before. And Howard, you remember when we were trying to put the 800 megahertz tower up by the park, and it had a significant impact. I'm using that terminology now. And as a result, remember we went through it, when we went through the historical resources in Virginia, and to mitigate the significant impact, we contributed $30,000. You with me?
I'm with you.
Okay, so I'm just saying,
Yep.
when you see stuff like this,
Yep.
that's what happened. So did tower go up? Yeah, and what was, and I have to say the whole, as Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story, the National Park Service got space on the tower so they could communicate, and then we contributed $30,000 to pave one of the Vermont monuments or something. We
Right.
had
And then it was no longer a
Then it was
significant
no
visual,
longer a
significant
significant
visual impact.
So that's
All
all I
right,
had
move
to
on.
Yes, sir. The last chapter proposed for amendment would be the Natural Resources chapter. Policy 1 of that chapter is to balance the protection of environmental resources and natural wildlife habitats with development. We're proposing to add new Policy 12, which reads to promote the incorporation of pollinator habitat improvements, native vegetation regrowth, and wildlife protection in development projects. This was one that we came up with the solar energy facilities in mind. These are really large projects, and we heard some concerns from the board, the Planning Commission, and speakers in the crowd regarding wildlife protection. That led us to look into it further, and we came across a good concept of these pollinator habitat improvements, which are supportive of bee colonies, and also native vegetation regrowth, which is the concept that what grows there naturally that's not an invasive species should regrow there most of the time. And so this policy was kind of came from that exploration of wildlife with respect to solar energy facilities and the large amounts of space they take up.
So are you saying that we're looking at having them put a portion of land aside to do that? Because I mean, if you look at any of those facilities in other states that I've seen that are up, there's nothing but clear fields and solar panels. How are they going to do that? How does that work?
Well, we're receptive to what they propose. That's the broadness of the comprehensive plan allows us not to specify. It's not a code, because I don't know how to put it into words. There's too many options, and to codify something like this, just don't know how to do it. This allows us to reference this code, or this comp plan policy in the review of a solar energy facility or something, or some other project that gets a comp plan review, and weigh in as to what strategies or what efforts are being done or not being done by the applicant that we believe could be improved upon.
So are you saying it's a recommendation, it's not going to be a requirement?
Well, the comprehensive plan gets looked at typically not line by line. For example, the 2 rezonings you looked at tonight, the special use you looked at tonight, all 3 of those cases had comprehensive plan reviews in them. And what staff does when they write those is they look through the different elements of the comprehensive plan for policies that are applicable to that development. And if there is one that is a red flag, or if there's one that's a great, that the applicants are doing well, we note about it in the comprehensive plan review. This is an additional not criteria, but something else that we can look at through the course of that comprehensive plan review.
Well, I'm just curious about how that would work. I mean, because obviously, probably the Berkeley District and Livingston District are the 2 big districts where if something like this was to come in, you're talking thousands of acres. So you're talking about clearing 2,000 or 3,000 acres. So you obviously you're going to be running off wildlife by doing that. And I'm just curious about with this in there, how are we looking at some way of protecting them, some way of setting land aside so wildlife has, I mean, what's the purpose of this? I mean, I don't quite follow what you're doing here.
If I may, I think this number 12 is just to encourage these people to consider this, more or less.
I would agree
Whether
with
they do it or not is entirely up to them. Of course, it depends on how you use the comp plan, whether you use it as a rule of thumb or whether you want to use it as a stick. Right?
Yes, Mr. Burns.
I wouldn't disagree with that. The comprehensive plan analysis frequently will contain things that are discussions that either support or oppose or provide grounds for opposition to your cases that you review here. So we don't specify what it is that we're looking for here, only that these are the goals. These are things we want you to be considering. These are things that we hear our community has an interest in, and we'd like to at least have you consider.
Patrick,
Yes,
let me see if I can help us through this. The comprehensive plan is a set of guidelines. And when a project comes before the staff looks at if the project is in conformity with the comprehensive plan. When they say, and you got all these items that are there. So as you look at and engage a project and you analyze a project, then it may be something, okay, wait a minute, I'm just using an example now, what Howard talked about a little bit. You know, are you going to go in and clear the land, or, you know, there are solar panels I've seen have actually been in with corn crops. I mean, there's different ways you can do that. You are not the experts on how to do that. So what you would do is, okay, is there an element in their proposal that at least touches or does that makes it somewhat satisfactory? Hit it?
That sounds pretty accurate.
Okay.
I mean, when we're discussing these with an applicant, you know, if there's something that we're seeing isn't really addressed or missing from an application, we could tell them, look, the comprehensive plan has this policy in it. Is there anything you're doing to address these concerns? Dialogue will build from there.
I understand the intent here, and I think we need some guidelines. However, I'm very concerned with perhaps the interpretation of this and the subjectivity of it. For instance, wildlife protection. You can take the extreme view that I want $100,000 to protect an endangered species that's potentially on your property versus what I think this means is a deer running into a solar panel. And I'm concerned with the extreme views on some of these things and not the law of unintended consequences here is what I'm concerned about. I think we're heading in the right direction. And then how do we as a commission handle on a consistent basis? So, you know, I want to be consistent. I want to be fair with all the applications. Then I want to be, you know, address some of the subjectivity if we can. I don't know if we can, but anyway.
And just to point out, this says promote the incorporation. So, you know, the language is all, you know, should, promote, consider. That's all the language, and these are written sort of broad because they apply in a rather broad manner to a lot of different types of development projects. If we were to get really specific, our comp plan would start growing again. So
We definitely don't want that,
So what we
right.
tried to do here was to take a tact where we were just addressing development projects, promoting the incorporation. This isn't going to apply to every project. And maybe, wildlife protection, it could be that there's a bald eagle nesting area, and that's what we're looking at. It could be the long-eared bat that we've had before. There's different things besides just in general trying to ensure
Well-
that every deer in the area still has safe
You-
passage through the area.
Yeah, you raise a good point. I would hate to have the long-eared bat situation hold up a project that's needed, like a solar panel project that generates energy. That's my concern, is that if we, in that example, to me is something that we need to be very careful of.
Really, I don't. Yeah, so, and ultimately, it is the county's comprehensive plan, it is a guide, and ultimately the board has the final decision.
Yep.
So,
Understood. Anyway, what else you got, Patrick? Is that it?
That'd be the all, sir. Staff is recommending approval, staff is requesting permission to authorize for public hearing to have more dialogue about these. I will stand by for any of your questions.
Yeah, I would strongly consider public hearings on these issues, and I think you need a motion from the board, from the commission. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Well, thank you for your time tonight.
Anything else for us tonight? I've lost my agenda.
that's it.
Very good. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Yes, sir.
But new business?
New business.
Yes. Wanda, where are we at on my request to have a hearing or a review of the mixed-use plan?
I was thinking that we would come back in the new year with that.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I had questions that came from tonight's rezonings. I didn't want to ask during the rezoning because I don't think it was really applicable. But the $2,600 that was generated from the one for the offsite improvements for the Mine Road project, what can that go towards? And the new proffer guidelines, what can that be done? Where does that go?
So it's based on specific projects within our capital improvement plan. So we calculated the costs, looking at a per capita basis, so that it would be a cost that would be applicable to, a person in that new house. So they're specific projects. And
So essentially it frees up what was budgeted.
What happens is staff will look and see how much proffer monies, or, let's say there's a CIP project for Mine Road or Lansdowne or something like that, and how much proffer, and they'll use that money first before they'll use local tax dollars, or they'll use bond money or something, for example. But the problem is those dollars are so little anymore. There was a time when it was significant, but there's so little anymore, they have to be supplemented. But they'll always go to that proffer, because I know when they create the budget every year, they always will try to tap that proffer money first, if they can. And the other problem is on some of the developments, you understand they come at a certain time, those proffers are due. So, it may be 3, 4, 5 years out before you even see that.
And will always be the case where we have discrepancies because Mr. Payne was up here saying, hey, there's school capacity. Patrick's telling us there's not going to be school capacity at Massaponics. And there's a $75,000 difference in, the total impact. I mean, I feel like these constantly are always going to be these discrepancies, but is there a way to make them less of a...
well, with the fiscal impact analysis, the county, its tax base is based on assessed value. It doesn't matter what the house sells for. Ultimately, it's the county's assessed value. So that's why we use assessed value. That directly translates to the tax revenues that the county receives. So that's why we're comfortable with that approach.
Any other new business? Following the agenda, any public comment? Hearing none, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Do I have a second? All those in favor say aye. Motion passes. Thank you.